Hey everybody, it's your girl RogjettSpeaks with Truth Narrative. So this is the first of many that will be coming. Really excited about what we're doing. So for those of you who might be wondering what Truth Narratives is, this is a platform where we are going to be reframing, redefining what it means to have our melanin, to be rocking our stories, our lives, our melanin. And we're doing it in ways that are promoting health, promoting just positive vibes throughout. And so today I'm kicking off the entire show with a mental health series focused on Black men. And so we have a couple of really cool guests today. I have Desmond Smith and I have Shanta Hayes, and we are going to be just having a conversation. We're going to keep some things real. There will be some weighty moments. We'll be a little silly probably because we've known each other for some years. I'll introduce them formally in a second, but just one thing, we have known each other, I guess, what, gosh, 20
plus years.
Something like that, yeah.
Crazy. So I think about that in the context of just, I mean, first of all, we still look good because the melanin don't what? It don't crack. It don't move. It don't move. It don't move. I'm 43. Des, how old are you?
41.
41. Shanta?
42.
We are in these streets, y'all. Thank you, Jesus.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
This is all right. We've known each other for quite some time, and obviously, you know, life happens. We met in college. We actually spent some wonderful times together in college through our organizations that we're part of, and we've kept up and maintained over the years, which is just really great. I think a lot of people have that story at their colleges and universities, but I do think because of the type of organizations we were connected to, that we have just continued to have a community that's strong. We're also part of a pretty dope athletic fitness community now that is just popped off recently. Des, you want to speak to that real quick? Because I think it's pretty hype. It would be a nice plug.
I can't remember the official name of it, but
it's fine.
Like UMich Black Alumni Runners. And we just been started by Sydney Bailey. I went to high school with Sydney back in Grand Rapids.
You do? Okay.
And Ronnie Johnson, right?
Yep.
I didn't know Ronnie, but I knew Sid from teenage years. His dad actually was my principal in high school.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So, but we've been encouraging each other to be healthy and start with walking or running 50 miles in the month.
Yes.
And you know, over the summer, you know, everybody was gaining that COVID-19 weight. I know I gained a few pounds, and I was like, you know what, why not? So, you know, it started with, I don't know, 400 or 500 people, you know, walking and encouraging each other. And that started, I don't know, maybe June or July, somewhere around there. And every month, everyone's been just re-upping, you know, doing another 50, and some are doing 100 and some are doing 200. I'm like, yeah, I'm good with 50, but you know,
baseline, right?
I'm good with 50. Like if I can get to 50, I'm good. I'll be there tomorrow. But that's what, you know, it's been a lot of encouraging words, and they've definitely helped me in my health journey. So
I love that. Thank you. Shanta, you want to contribute? You're also part of the group, yes?
Yes, I am part of the group. And while the overarching goal is 50, you know, each person drives themselves. There's definitely support from the group, from the village, but I know myself, I'm not at 50 yet. I have some underlying medical conditions, which kind of limit my movement sometimes. So for me, it's just being better than I was the month before.
That's good.
You know, so I'm like, whoop, whoop, I got XYZ. It wasn't 50, but I'm getting closer.
Right.
So, and I still get love, still get support, you know, so it's very much the camaraderie and the teamwork and saying, you know, you got this, keep going.
Right.
Love it.
That's great. For my own self, I hit 50, I think, for 2 solid months back to back in the summer. So I think it was August, going into the fall, August, and then September, I think I hit 50. And then I had to take a little minute because I had some health challenges and things. So I'm looking forward. I'm back 100%. And I'm back to rock it out, come January, the new challenge. So it's exciting. Definitely a wonderful platform, I think, in terms of just really us focusing on our physical health. And it's so encouraging, as you stated. It's one of the most positive groups that I've actually joined. I have not wanted to do some of the fitness groups, not because they're not positive, but it's just, I'm like, this group is something different. It speaks differently and hits differently when you actually know so many people, like personally that are part of it and that are so encouraged. And then you start to learn a little bit more about their own personal journeys, right, with health and these kinds of things, and just seeing how inspiring it is. It's been great. So we said all of that to say that it's one more sort of iteration of us in another life step, still maintain friendships, maintain these relationships over the years. And that's so important. So thank you guys for sharing that. So we're going to dive right in. Again, we are talking about mental health awareness, and I really wanted to hit it in the Black community. So the series is going to feature Black men, these first few episodes, and we're going to hit women. We're going to talk about mental health in children. These things will come up. The entire narrative shifts is not all about mental health, but this is, I felt led to really just start the entire thing with this series. So Desmond, wanted to talk to you a little bit. You're obviously a Black man in these American streets.
Yes, I am. Can't hide that.
And, there's such a stigma, I believe, in the Black community as it pertains to just positive mental health or good mental health. When you hear terms like therapist, counselor, I need to go get help, these are not necessarily phrases that we speak a whole lot, right? Like we tend to hide these things, or, we tend to just kind of, I got this, or because of sort of cultural backdrops, we've just learned to keep pushing through hard things. And I wanted to kind of get your feedback as a Black male in this society about, what kinds of things have you encountered in terms of your own mental health, what challenges, maybe what successes, and what has been important to you through your own journey. And so if you want to share anything, I would love to hear from you in terms of kind of your own experiences here.
Wow. Well, first, thank you very much
You're
for thinking of me. And I know that you've raised some questions and some conversation online, and that kind of started this, because I don't often share my my own journey of mental health. So I've had major and minor things that happened in my life, and I know that being an educator, you see a lot of things. You see a lot of students that have gone through trauma or are going through trauma, and oftentimes you want to say, hey, you need to go to counseling, or you need to go see a therapist, and it's never really just that easy. And sometimes we talk to parents, and we encourage parents that either the child we've had some conversation with the child, and we encourage you to consider, because we can't tell them, we encourage you to consider some type of therapy or consider some type of counseling, unless it's like where they put themselves or someone else at harm, when it's pretty serious. But for me, I never considered any type of therapy or any type of counseling as a Black man until I was, well into my 30s. But leading up to that, life to me, my life was going fine. I finished college, I graduated high school, eventually finished college. I took the 10-year plan, but I got it done, right? And I went through things, and I went through some trials, and I went through many errors just to finish college. I got married, then we had our first child, and then I went back to college and finished. And then, my family, my wife and I, we moved to Detroit. We had our first child in Detroit. But before we had our first child, like 2 months after we moved to Detroit, we had a miscarriage. And, it was early in the pregnancy. We hadn't really told a lot of people yet. But it was trauma. We were like, man, this ain't right. This hurts. Like, I've never felt any pain like that before. And you know, months go by, weeks go by, and you're just like, all right, we had a miscarriage, and you just keep going. Which is something that a lot of people just do, not even Black men, but a lot of people, they go through a traumatic event and they just, pick it up and they just kind of carry that weight, but they just keep going with it. So that was one of, several experiences. So then, I continue on in my career, things start to improve. We have our first successful child, and then we had a second successful pregnancy, and then we go through a third pregnancy, and we weren't trying. Well, we were trying to have a child, right? But we weren't trying to have a child, right? So, so we go through that, and we're like, well, I guess we can have this baby. It'll be great. It'd be nice to have a third. We lost the first one. Let's enjoy and appreciate this miracle baby, because we weren't. It was just like, okay, God, all right, you got it. Whatever, we're gonna have this baby. So we went through some months of like just awe and not really planning. So we went through several months of just going through the steps of pregnancy with my wife, and eventually, after probably about 30 weeks, we were like, I guess we should get ready for this baby, right? So we get to a certain length, and the appointments start picking up, and then all of a sudden at the new year, we went and visited some friends. My wife was like, something's not right, and I'm like, well, let's go see a doctor, and we went and go see the doctor, and you go to that appointment and you think that they're going to say, oh, this is happening, everything will be okay, or maybe you just need to rest, or everything is going fine. But we sat in that office, and they checked the pulse, the heartbeat of the baby, and they're like, there's no heartbeat. So my wife carries this baby for 33 weeks, right? And we were just at the point where we were accepting the fact that we're having this child. Like, up till then, we were just like, nah. We had finally just got paint for the bedroom. We started getting clothes. We started getting furniture. We're like, okay, we really need to start getting ready for this child. And we're sitting there in the doctor's office like, God, why would you allow us to go through the finally accepting the fact that we have this child, and then you take this baby away from us? Like, why would you do that? Like, come on. Like, so we're sitting there and we're like just in complete shock, just crying. All you can do is sit there and console each other and cry, and just so we're sitting there crying. You leave the office and you're just hoping that nobody sees you. You just want to kind of disappear. So we leave, we go home, we tell family, right? Because at this point, you have to tell family, because in a few weeks, they're expecting this baby that you've been carrying for months. So we go through this initial trauma, and my wife has to then, several days later, birth this baby, right? So, one, we find out that we're not having this child. Two, this baby doesn't just disappear. This baby comes into the world without life. And so she births the baby. I'm holding the baby for like hours, like praying and like, I don't know, just hoping that eventually something happens, but nothing happens. You're just there, and you just kind of numb to the fact that you've gone through an entire experience, and there's literally a dead baby to show for it. Like, that's the end result.
Mm.
Like, you can't just bounce back from something like that. So, we were in the hospital in the labor delivery ward, and everybody else in the hospital is having babies. You're hearing the crying, you're hearing everything. But in our room, it's
Mm.
quiet. It's quiet. It's still. We had a couple visitors, a couple people from our church came, and they can console you a little bit, but you don't you don't want anything but your baby. Um, and there's nothing that can fill that void other than having your own child in your arms alive. So I could leave the hospital a couple of days later, and we're just like sitting there like, where do we go from here? What do we do? Because we can't just continue on with our lives. Um, so we hear from people from church. They pray for us. Our pastors call, they pray for us. Friends call, they pray for us. People come and visit and pray for us, and we're just angry. Eventually you go from this shock and this grief, and then we're angry. Um, so after a few days of being off from work, mind you, this happens in 2014. And January 2014 is when we had like some of the coldest days. Most people don't remember this, but like these were like the first days where school was canceled because it was too cold. Like
Okay.
it was frozen outside.
Mm.
So I had a couple extra days to grieve before I had to go back to work. So eventually I go back to work, and I'm trying to just carry myself as I normally do.
Right.
And I'm realizing that I'm like, he's super emotional, like all the time. Like any little thing can just like that, just set me right off. So I'm talking to some students, and mind you, I'm working in Ypsilanti for the 1 year I worked in Ypsilanti. I'm out in Ypsilanti, and I'm working with a group of students. They were labeled at risk. I hate the label, but they were labeled at risk, right? So I'm working in the small learning community of about 50 students. There's 50 students, there's two teachers, there's a social worker, there's a special ed teacher, there's a dean, because we have so many like literally behavior all over the place. Like, so I'm over this small learning community, and one of my students is just acting like a student, right? So I walk out of my room, and I walk up to this kid, and I just start screaming at him, like just yelling, like, "What's wrong with you? You lucky to be alive. You don't know what people like sacrifice. Like, you just taking everything for granted." I'm just like yelling at this kid. And if you know me, which most of you probably don't, I'm not a yeller. Like, I'm like real calm. I'm laid back. I'm a drummer, so I'm just kind of in the pocket, just laid back, just chilling, right? Um, so when a couple of the people on my staff, they're like come out of their room, like, is that Mr. Smith like yelling at a kid? So
Wow.
the dean of students for this program, he like literally just puts his arms around me and just like pulls me away. He's like, "Des, man, what's going on?" I mean, everybody knew that what I had gone through, when I returned back to work. They knew we lost the baby. They knew that I was, going through some things, but this was not who I was. And one thing that I knew personally, like this is not me. I don't yell at students. I love students because like students like there's so many experiences that my students went through that I was so familiar with, and I could talk about it, I can speak about it, I can love on them about it, and I can share my experiences with them, and they can understand me, and they can understand that I really do understand what they're going through. I love them, and I want what's best for them. And that was how I was able to connect to literally every student that I had, was by shared experiences or understandings, because we didn't grow up together, right? These kids are 20 years younger than me, but a lot of our experiences are similar. Just being an African American male, and all of those students, except like two of them,
Mhm.
uh, were African American. So we shared a lot of those experiences. But what came to be was the weeks after us losing this child, is that we were like struggling emotionally. The both of us, my wife and I, were just struggling. Um, we're doing our best to hide our feelings and hide our emotions, but my wife is crying all the time. I'm crying. I'm angry, like angry. like to the point of like just straight up anger. Like I can't describe it. It's just way too much anger and way too many raw emotions that were just like right here, just ready to come out. So eventually, I don't know who talked to us about this, but someone talked to my wife and was like, "You guys should just go to counseling." We're like, "For what?" You know what I mean? Like, okay, we'll go to counseling. So we talked about it together, and eventually we got a list of names because you know you can't get referrals, but we didn't know anybody that had gone to counseling other than one person. So we got a few names of Christian counselors, right? And so we go to this guy not too far from us. Not sure why we selected him at all, but we selected him. He might have been just like first on the list. I don't know. So we go to this guy and we sit there and we talk with him and share our first experience of trauma, well, our most recent experience with trauma. It wasn't our first experience; it was our most recent experience with trauma, and with the birth of our stillborn. And he's like real like nonchalant about everything that we were sharing with him. And as we were going through the session, we're like, this dude don't care about us. Is it just that he just wants our money? Is he about to retire and he's just trying to fatten the pockets before like he's done? Like what is he, and why does he not empathize or at least sympathize with us? Because we know that he's seen and heard some things. So we finished with that session, and my wife and I, we're literally walking out of the door, not even to the car yet. And we're like, yeah, we ain't going back to that dude. Like, we got nothing from that other than uh, a little less money in our pockets. Like, that's all we got out of that, was paying him for an hour of our lives that we could have just sat and cried for another hour. So a couple of weeks go by, we get the name of another psychotherapist, and she was Christian based, and she it was a little drive away, so we had to like plan this one. It's not just down the street, so we had to plan the drive. We had to plan like lunch, like we had to figure out what we're going to do with our lives. We had to get babysitters because as parents, you can't just walk out the door. You got to plan everything. Right. So we planned this time to go visit this next psychotherapist, and we walk into the office and we're like, okay, this is already like, as soon as you walked in, you already started feeling like, okay, this person might be a little bit better. So we sit and we talk to her, and we share this initial experience with her, and she starts digging into things. She's digging into the pain that we are feeling and why we're feeling it, and is it because of the baby? And then we went back a few times, and then she started digging into some other things, like other things in our past. I'll talk about myself, but there's many other things in my past that have caused trauma that I probably should have gone to therapy for decades ago, like my own upbringing, right? Things that you don't think about that cause trauma and pain and emotional releases that you really can't control. So, things in my own past, things about how I was raised, things about, college experiences, things about, our first years of marriage, things about, how I treat people, how I treat my wife, and how I feel, and how I feel about things that have happened to me that I've never had to deal with in life ever before. So she's sitting here asking me these questions, and she's like, do you think it's because of this experience? And I'm sitting there like, why are you in my business like that? Like, I didn't ask. Like, I just wanted to, feel better because of losing the baby. But she's making me think back and recall and reflect on many other things that have happened in my life. And I wasn't really happy about that, to be honest. But I went ahead and continued having these conversations. Sometimes it would be with my wife, and sometimes I would go by myself, and we would call it an ussy. Like my wife and I, we called it an ussy, where I would go by myself and it would just be the psychotherapist, or she would go by herself, and she would see the psychotherapist. And you know, this started back in 2014, and we've continued on seeing this lady since. You know, sometimes it would be more regular depending on what's going on in our lives, and then sometimes, you know, we can kind of fade back and, you know, visit quarterly, or, you know, when we needed a tune up, you know. So I'll stop with that. I think I shared a lot already. So go ahead.
So, oh, thank you. Thank you. No, Desmond, you know, thank you for sharing that. That's something that's just, it is so heavy, and it's so deep. I really applaud you for being able to share that with this audience. And also just, you know, not being afraid to put those things out there as a Black man, because I know masculinity is a thing, right? And so,
Right.
you know, that's a whole nother layer that we'll hit another time. But you know, I just really appreciate you for, you know, sharing that, to open up this dialogue a bit more. You know, I was listening and jotting down, so I'm the queen of jot. Jotting things down over here. And I heard anger come up a couple of times, and I heard numbness, right?
Mhm.
I think a couple of times. And I want to kind of talk about that a little bit more. I want to dig deeper, and I want to hit Shanta. I want to invite you in on this part of the conversation. Um, this anger, this numbness, Shanta, like, and I think you're muted right now, so I'm gonna make sure you come off of mute. But talk to us about what that is. You know, like, I think, you know, we all experience, you know, anger. We all experience some level of being numb, but we don't always know why or what is actually causing that. Or it might just be like, why am I feeling like this? You know, when I heard, you know, such a visceral reaction or story, you know, regarding Desmond in the hallway, and you know, him being embraced in that moment, you know, that had to be quite confusing in that moment, right? And so we tend to show symptoms of or display that which is sometimes confusing internally, right? And so I'm just curious to know, Shanta, like, you know, talk to us a little bit about that anger, that numbness, and some of these expressions that we might not know how to really, I guess, speak about much. Go ahead.
Well, so when I heard anger so many times, I was like, that is his grief crying out to him, and he's not knowing how to express it. And a lot of times we don't consider the fact that the very second
Right.
stage of grief is anger. So I like to go to the end and work backwards, but the end is their beginning.
Mhm.
The end is the acceptance of this child.
Mm.
They had finally accepted,
Mhm.
okay, we're ready, we're doing this, we're having this baby. Then to get to acceptance and to have to radically change, because this is not what we anticipated, this is not what we planned for, this loss, that was their grief. The denial, right? The denial is the first stage. We were ready. We had picked out paint. We had picked out furniture. We got clothes.
Right.
This baby was supposed to come home. This holding the baby for hours in the silence. That's the denial. The
Mhm.
bargaining, right? We're talking to God, like, give us back this child. We ready. The anger is the thing. It's the seed that's buried deep down, right? Because you're still covered in this denial and this love and this hope, right? But seeds, when watered, like in
Wow.
this loss is the watering of this seed that grew into something that had not manifested before. He had not seen that expression of, frustration with a youth before. That was not him. That's not
Right.
me. I'm laid back. I'm in the cut. I'm a drummer. That's not what I do. But you just watered something that was connected, because she took you back, and rightfully so, because in a lot of clients, when they experience miscarriages, I
Right.
just got to get through this.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just this child.
Mhm.
It felt like it was this child because it was in the moment. They were present, they were there.
Right.
But this wasn't the first child they had lost. So it had been watering for a long time because they never gave it the proper attention. And attention can, good or bad, things will still grow.
Yeah.
Depending on the attention. They just might grow the way you want them to. So that anger was that grief manifested in that moment over the loss of not one child, but two. And then not having repaired those fissures in the relationship that he and his wife had. So, we got into acceptance, which is the last stage of grief, right? Just to get back to the denial, the anger, the bargaining, and the depression all over again. So it's this upheaval of all this stuff that you hadn't addressed before. And I wanted to speak to what you said about, you didn't know how you selected that first therapist. And, I tell people all the time, fit is very important. When finding a therapist, it's like a pair of jeans, okay?
Right.
You don't want to be trying to jump to get in them. No offense. But it should be like a, pull them up, button, zip them. I'm good. You know what I'm saying? There are going to be some challenges sometimes, especially, if they're a nice fitting pair. Every once in a while, you might have to take a breath. Okay?
Right.
Everything is good. But the second therapist, when you said it looked like she put a little effort into it, right? That is important because we are sitting with people's lives, their feelings. That is something to be very careful with. That's a china shop, yo.
Right.
You walk around like, ooh, but we're not just knocking stuff over. We're going to approach it carefully. We're going to pick it up. How do you like this? Does this look good to you? How do you feel about it? What do you see when you look at this?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Do you envision this thing? You can't just be knocking stuff over. So fit is very important. And when you talked about the time, the finding the babysitters and the drive and packing the lunch, this is an investment in you and your family. And investments require time and effort. Your marriage requires time and effort. Your personal self-care requires time and effort. So make sure you are putting those things in. Put yourself on the calendar. Don't cancel on you.
Right.
You need this. That reflection, and I read, your post, Des, and you inspired me a couple days ago talking about, your reflections. And I was like, you know what? Let me do that. But we have to make sure that, we do acknowledge where those feelings are coming from. So her helping you to unpack those feelings, that was a good thing.
Yeah.
But that was the fit that you needed. You didn't need somebody to just sit back and listen.
Right.
You need somebody to question, to guide that introspection, to guide that reflection. Because if she had not guided that reflection, you would not have put this loss and this loss together, because there was that gap in between. It was like, I got over that.
Right.
It's like, but did you really?
No, I didn't.
So.
Wow. Thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit more about that fit. And I like that because you said fit matters. That was really good for me to hear. So Des, I look, you went to the first therapist. You were reluctant to do that anyway, right?
Right.
And so then you get to this therapist who you're just like, this dude, what? What's this joke about? And no slam on the field, obviously. But I want to know if when you guys left that session where you met with, I don't want to do this. I want to do this. Like, did you have a moment where you paused and was like, we're not doing this because you had a bad experience? Sometimes what I hear in my conversations with folks is that, oh yeah, they had a therapist, they tried it, and then they're just like, you know what, I tried it. I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to try this again. And so I'm curious to know, did you guys have a pause before you reached out to the next therapist? And then, well, go ahead and answer that, and then I have to follow up.
Yeah, we thinking back, like it was a pause before we started going to therapy. Like, we had to accept the fact that we were like, okay, we don't want, because we've seen people that have gone through trauma or loss, major trauma or loss, like struggle in their marriage. So initially it was, we don't want our marriage to fall apart because of this experience that we've gone through. So we need to go to counseling. So we saw him and we were like, that dude was jacked up. So it was intentional, and we were deliberate on the fit. Like Shanta said, like, we got some recommendations. My wife talked to her, and then we were like, she might be the one. So we hiked out to where she was, and it was immediely, it was like, yeah, this is much better. These jeans fit nice and snug versus me having to get them boys on.
That's great. It is
very important.
and I'm glad that you shared that. Even, and I'll share briefly here, this is not my segment, but just, like, it's not a secret that I've, gone through therapy, and that I'm a huge advocate of therapy. I believe people should have therapists like people have dentists. They have a hairstylist. That's the way I think about it, and I believe that. But I know that my first experience with therapy, nice enough guy, but I felt like it was just kind of like, just not, not really effective, right? Then took a huge period of time, and then was put in a situation where I needed a therapist again. And that particular therapist was fantastic. Maybe had her for about 11 or 12 sessions, dealing with some PTSD type stuff, and so there was specific training for that. And then, took a break, and then now, I've been in therapy for some time, for almost a year, I think, not off and on, but consistently for like a year almost. And for me, I'm not someone who wants to bounce around, just like you wouldn't bounce around with your hairstylist or your barber, right? Like, you're not going to bounce around, folks. I think it's important that we do get a good fit, right? And then you stick with that. So let's talk about some of the challenging moments, and you can disclose whatever you so choose. But I know, obviously, there's work in therapy, and I think some people don't realize that part. So let's talk. I want us to talk about the honesty aspect, and the work that's that needs to be put in. Shanta, I'm going to throw that to you first, and then Desmond. So, Shanta, from the clinician side, let's talk about honesty. You get a patient that comes in, a client that comes in, they need some help. They say they need some help. They're sharing some things, but you're realizing some things about them in terms of them being closed off or not being truthful about some things. Talk to us a little bit about that experience when you're practicing.
Well, okay, so my audience is primarily children and families.
Okay.
And I speak to children like they have brains that are growing, and I want them to understand the impact of the actions that they have now in the future. So I tell them, I give my clients a sense of agency, and I let them know that what they say is protected with me unless they have a plan to harm themselves or others, right? But I also encourage them by telling them, I prefer a hard truth over a soft lie any day, right? Because the consequences of a hard truth are going to be much lighter than if we find out it's a lie, because we can't fix immediately the lie, because we don't find out about that till later, right? But let's talk through this, right? The truth can be hard, but let's talk through it, right? Let's not be afraid of those feelings. Let's figure out where that's coming from. But I also tell them the worst lies you tell are the ones you tell yourself, because you start to believe them. So we do a lot of discussion on self-talk, and that narrative shift, right? Because we want to shift from, telling yourself these negative untruths. We want to speak positively. We want to speak truthfully to ourselves. So I always approach them in that regard. Let's always stay on the truth. Okay. It's hard sometimes, but we can talk it out. Because typically, if you tell somebody the truth up front, we can calm ourselves down in my space. We can work through this calmly. We can breathe, we can meditate, we can do whatever it takes. But the truth you're going to be safe here.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you. Des, so, from someone in the other seat, right?
Yeah.
And having to communicate information with a perceived and honest stranger, let's
Right.
talk about what that looks like. Did you find in that first session, I mean, you said it was comfortable, so that was good, but she was digging. And so there's, you have these defenses that fly up and so much in a first session and subsequent sessions, for so many folks, right? And so because of the gravity of what you guys have been exposed to and experienced, I definitely want to know, how open you were that first session or those first few sessions, and in terms of the truth aspect, how important that is.
That's wow. So the first few sessions were mostly about our feelings with the tragedy of losing our child, right? So we were just focusing on how that was impacting our lives. And I was good with that. I could be open and honest about that stuff, right? Because that was fresh. It was clear. Everybody knew. There was nothing hidden about that. Like, I cried, I'm angry, I was cussing at folks. Like, that was what it was. I could be clear and very open about that. But then when she starts peeling that onion back on other hurts and other pains and other experiences that I had, then I was like, hold on. Like, I don't know if I want to talk about me, right? We can talk about how I feel about the loss of my child, but I don't know if I want to be open and honest about how I feel based on other things that I've experienced, because then I got to talk about the rest of my life. I got to talk about how I was raised. I got to talk about how I treated girls or women when I was younger. Like, I got to talk about all these other things that I don't want to open up about. But as we went through these sessions, some with my wife sitting there and some by myself as an ussy, I felt more transparent because I could trust her, and I knew I could trust my wife. So there was just a level. There had to be, more trust of me trusting my therapist before I would open up about my feelings and thoughts about my own personal journey, because I can sit back as just being a Black man. We're taught to just kind of hold it in and just keep on going, because the next thing is going to happen and you'll forget about that experience, or you'll forget about her, or you'll forget about that beating or whatever. You're like, suck it up, like that. We're just taught to like suck it up, like, all right, I'll just and be cool and move on. But she did not allow me to just be cool and move on. Like, she was digging, and at first I wasn't feeling it. Like, some sessions I would leave and I'm like, why? I signed up for this. Like, I went I went to go get talked to or listened to, and she dug and dug and dug, and I left like feeling better but angry at the same time. Like, how do you walk out of therapy like feeling better and angry at the same time? Like, that shouldn't happen. Like, I paid you for this. Like,
Can I jump in real quick, Jen?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like going to the gym with a trainer, right? Okay.
Right.
Like, I want to feel different. It's that work. So Rogette referred earlier to the work that we have to put in when we go to therapy, and a lot of people don't think of it that way, but it is work. There's some heavy lifting. That's some weight, right? And you don't get to heavy weights until until that rapport has been built, until that trust has been established, that you can handle that, right? You got to peel back a couple layers first.
Right.
And that can take time. But let me tell you, that feeling, you know what that feeling is like when you run in 12-degree weather, but I did it.
Right.
Like, I'm cold, but I did it. I feel so good. And that is the reward you get from doing the deep work. from connecting point A to point W, right? Because
Right.
I think of therapy as like one of those very intricate dot to dots.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have all these connections in order to make a picture. Can you make the connections? And it's okay if you pause because there can be gaps in services sometimes.
Right.
But the hope is that you take the time to continue to connect the dots so you have a clearer picture of what's going on and how all this stuff fits together. Fit is very important throughout the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
It's not immediate. You're not going from, walking in the door to lifting 50 pounds. But when you walk out, that discomfort, that soreness in your muscles, but that definition that you built.
Oh, now.
Right.
That's good.
It's great that I love that you connected it to working out, because I used to work out, then I stopped working out, then I started working out, then I stopped working out. And then when COVID happened, of course, nobody worked out, right? And then we started doing this walking challenge, this 50-mile challenge. And at the beginning of the 50-mile challenge, my wife and I started walking like a few weeks prior, and my knee was like in so much pain. I don't know if it was extra 30 pounds that I gained over, the last couple of years or what. But at one day I was sitting at my desk, because my desk was in the front of my house. And I just stood up, and my knee was just like in so much pain. So I first started walking my wife. We walked like a mile, and I was like limping the whole time. I'm like, man, this ain't gonna work. Like, what am I gonna do? But it was painful, but I did it, like you said. And then, weeks go by, and then the 50-mile challenges come up, and I'm like, all right, Sid, what is this? All right, I'll check it out. So I checked it out, and I found myself walking, at first, 2, 3 miles, 5, 6 miles. Next thing you know, I'm walking like 8 to 10 miles, like at one time, just for no reason, just out there, listening to music. And I get home, I'd be a little sore, but not nearly as sore as I was when I first started walking, when I can barely walk, right? So it's so akin to the therapy sessions. Like at first you're like, man, this junk hurts. Like, do I really need to go back next week? Like, do I, just to feel this again? Right. And yes, you do, because that's the only way those muscles are going to start developing and growing and toning. And then, as time goes by, you start learning the strategies, learning coping skills, learning some things, and you're able to do some of that stuff on your own. But then you still need to go see your trainer.
Yes.
Periodically, right? And that's what we still do. Like, we'll still go see our therapist, every once in a while. Like, we even had our daughters go. They experienced trauma too. They saw their mother with child, and mom and dad came home without a child, right? So these are things that, like, as our oldest daughter, who's now 13, like, she still remembers. Like, the youngest one, she was just about to turn 2. She doesn't quite remember it as much, but my 13-year-old now, she still like talks about him. She, she'll mention him. She'll like, let's go see him at the cathedral, because he's laid to rest there. Like, she went through trauma too, and we can't neglect her experiences and deny her experiences, because she had an experience with this as well.
Well, thank you for that. I hadn't even considered, just in our conversation, even when we were touching on some of this the other day, just the impact, of your daughter having experienced that. So that's a whole other piece, because you're in a parent dynamic, trying to deal with your own trauma, trying to deal with your own grieving process, and then trying to model something that is, healthy, right, for your daughter, while she's going through that. Like, that's again, just, this stuff is heavy, and it does require work. I feel like, I don't know, that just like hit me kind of emotionally, kind of got me deep feels just now, just thinking about it, because I feel, and you guys can speak to this, growing up, how many times maybe you saw something challenging that your parents were having to go through, right? And you knew they were going through something difficult. You were being impacted by it, but no one checked in on your feelings,
at all.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we learn how to cope by whatever means we need to. For me, it was throwing myself into artistic everything or always busying myself with school stuff or whatever, right? Just so that I could not have to process or feel. And so I know some of my issues are I don't like to feel things. I don't like to feel hurt and pain. Like that's what I struggle with, right? And that, stems from childhood stuff, right? It's like I just didn't want to feel it. I don't want to feel it, right? But yeah, I feel like for so many of us, there weren't those check-ins. At least in our generation, like we didn't have a lot of check-ins. Like, hey, you okay? Like we know we just went through this thing. Are you okay? That wasn't a conversation had. And I'm kind of laughing. I mean, maybe it is now, and maybe other people that we grew up with, maybe they did have those check-ins. Like I'm not going to generalize there, but I think the majority of those in our age range, right, with Black parents,
Right.
Look, folks got to keep it pushing, and that's culturally, that's the cultural backdrop. Almost the mantra for our community, I think, is like it happened. We have to move forward. We've got to keep it pushing. Deal with it however you need.
So, can I push back just a little bit? Because I will not say that it's a cultural thing. I think that it is a human thing. That the way we deal with our challenges are the way that we saw modeled for us. You talked about modeling, and I talk a lot about modeling. And thank you, Des, for modeling healthy behavior for the girls by getting them into therapy, because a lot of times people feel as if, I read somewhere, someone said, children can't be broken. I was like, yes, they can.
Wow. I've seen many.
I was like, yes, they can.
Yeah.
But they can be fixed, with the proper tools and the proper coping skills. But they have to see that modeled by someone. Right. And it is important to check in with your kids and see how they're feeling, because they did experience that as well.
Right.
We have to recognize that their pain and our pain will not be the same.
Right.
But they still need somewhere to process that, somewhere safe to lay that. And, I'm very transparent. My children have been in therapy before. Divorce is labeled as a traumatic experience. And when I first heard that, I was highly upset.
Yeah.
But it was because what they had known was no longer. That baby was no longer. That was what they had known. They still needed a place to process that and figure out how to put their feelings back in place. But it's not just a divorce or the loss of a sibling. It could be, just poor sibling relationships. Like, I don't understand, this birth order thing is real. Like, why are we fighting like this? Or it could be, what if your family is transient? It may seem that this is, common. We move all the time. But what does that type of transience do to a child, especially when they see their peers, or when they're seeing different peers, because you're transient, having different experiences? Or what does that do to a parent-child relationship if you're not communicating with that child? I believe communication is the foundation of any good relationship. Including parent-child, because you still have to talk. If you want them to know something, you have to give them the knowledge. You have to give them the information. You have to give them vocabulary to express themselves. So making sure that they have the tools that they need so they can be resilient is very important. So thank you for addressing that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for contributing in that way. So yeah, not just a cultural issue. I do appreciate you, sharing that. We're going to wrap up pretty soon here, but I did want to touch on a couple of things. And let me just say this now. I would love for us to have another one of these conversations right here. Because, I want to dig a little bit deeper even, and then, Desmond, tell people what you do for a living. They heard you say educator, but what?
Yeah, I'm a middle school principal in South Redford School District. So I principal all day.
So obviously, in middle school, I mean, I teach middle school, so there, middle school is a whole nother level in terms of just the life stages that they're in, and
Mhm.
so what they deal with. So I would, at some point, would love to, invite you again so we can kind of hit that
Oh yeah.
given COVID-19 and just kind of the mental health aspect of our children and the
Mhm.
parents and staff. Like I would
Yeah.
love to have that conversation if you're open
Yes.
to that. And Shanta definitely would love for you to be engaged in that as well. So I mean, this can be something we do, over and over. But I do want to mention one thing. So what I heard you say, Desmond, is that you had a male therapist first.
Hmm.
And then you had a female therapist, and that's the one that you guys have pretty much, aligned with, and
Yeah.
she's been great for you. When I was thinking about all of this in the summertime, and I think both of you know this summer I kind of made this Facebook post, and
Mhm.
it was just kind of throwing it out there, like, hey guys, I want to know what you're thinking about in terms of mental health in the Black community and men in particular. Um, I would love to know your thoughts on. And I guess I'll throw this to Shanta first, actually. So I personally believe. I'm talking all over the place. I personally believe that for me, I
Mhm.
need a Black woman therapist. That is something that I intentionally sought out, especially in the climate and the dynamic that we live in socially. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
This time around, I was like, I need a Black woman therapist. Period. My therapist before her was a white woman in California, and she was amazing.
Mhm.
Okay, be clear, but I believe that people are gifted and called, into this role. And if you have a good therapist who is focused on the person, focused on their craft, constantly keeping people, what they need to do and how they need to serve, at the forefront, you can have amazing experiences with your therapist, right? For me, I needed a Black woman because I need there to be some relational aspect there, some relatability, I guess is a better word. So when I think of Black men and mental health,
Mhm.
I dug and did some research. I was like, there's not a lot of Black men therapists, first of all,
I'm sure.
right? Certainly none that might be at a like a PsyD level or PhD level, right, doctorate level. There are some MSWs. There are more that do not have that designation or credential yet. But I'm curious, Shanta. So you have some mentors and some people that you know who are Black men, right, in the field. And so I want you to speak about that, and then Des, what your thoughts are, about that. Like, do you feel like you can open up about certain things and it be relatable, given the therapist that you have now versus the therapist that you had before? And in another episode, we'll talk about those gender uh,
Hmm.
situations as well, and masculinity and these kinds of things. So, Shanta, if you could go ahead and speak to that.
Well, thank you. I would love to.
Yeah.
So the numbers are low for men of color that are clinicians, mental health clinicians, but they are out there. I'm very happy to say they are out there. Sometimes I refer to them as unicorns, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to find one. But preference and fit are also important.
Hmm.
So while I do take the name, number, email, and website of every Black male therapist that I run across,
Yes.
because I'm building, my super team,
Hmm.
Right.
there are other things to consider, like what is the client's preference?
Hmm.
Do they want a male? Do they want a female? Do they want someone they can ethnically identify with? And most people do, and most parents, especially when working with children, they do, especially in communities of color, because there are a lot of cultural ideals to be taken into account during therapy. A lot of people don't think about that, but that's an actuality.
Hmm.
But when I meet Black male therapists, I am definitely sure to engage with them, build relationships with them so that I can refer out other men
Mm.
that are seeking that type of counsel. So first I'm going to listen to them, see what they're trying to do. And it's like, oh yes, I've got someone for you.
Mhm.
Pull it out. I'm like,
Hmm.
here you go.
Mhm.
But we have to build and maintain those relationships, just like we've done here. But in the professional community, we have to build and maintain those relationships so we can know where to point people, what direction to point people when they're looking for someone. But we also have to bear in mind that all the time, they're not looking for someone that looks like them.
True.
I do know another male of African descent. He was like, I don't want a man, because he felt that would be too much pushback for him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, what do you want? It's like, okay. So we ask about their snaps, their strengths, their needs, their abilities, their preferences, and their supports. So what do you need to help round out that picture? What's your preference for a therapist? So making sure that we're taking into account what people want and not just what we think they need.
That's good. That's really good. Desmond, speak to me initially.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts about the therapist that you had, and then the therapist that you have now in terms of culture, race, gender?
Yeah. So I'm gonna be 100% honest, because that's the only way to go, right? When we decided to go to therapy, my wife found this list. I don't even know where the list came from. And, she got the first guy. He was a white male. He was on this Christian counseling list. I have no idea. I may have to ask her, like, where'd you get this list? So, I think he was, referred, and he was on this list. So we went. At that point in our lives, race and gender, that wasn't the priority at the time. We needed help.
Yes.
So it's like pulling into the emergency room. You get who you get, right? Because we were going through, we were bleeding out, literally bleeding out. So so when we saw him, we were like, nah, this isn't going to fit. We were a little more careful with how we selected the second person, the person that we're still with. We didn't know her ethnic background. All we knew was that she was a Christian woman, and we were like, sure, let's try this out, because it couldn't be worse than the first guy, right? So we went to her, and I didn't have a preference, honestly. I didn't care who we saw. I just know we needed help. So whoever was at the door was getting these dollars, so to say. But if I had the opportunity and time to investigate, I don't know. The thing is, with her, let me go back to her. With her, she does a great job of pushing back on my thoughts and my beliefs, and the things that no one other than my wife has ever pushed on me about. Like when my wife and I started dating, she would push on me on some things, and I'm like, no woman has ever talked to me like this. I kind of like you, right? So, and that just continued. We got married, and we still have these difficult conversations. We'll sit, and she'll be like, let's talk about such and such. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. But as a Black man, we don't want to talk about that stuff.
Right.
Some Black men do. Most Black men don't. So if I had the choice, back to that, if I had the choice, I don't know if I would seek out anyone. I mean, I guess it would be kind of, I don't want to sound kind of silly, but it'd be kind of cool to see what it'd be like to have a Black male therapist. Like, he's had to have gone through some experiences that I've gone through, right? And he can speak on that. Just like when I see my students, I taught high school for 8 years, and I went to high school, right? So I could talk about my own personal experiences, the experiences that I've gone through in college, because when you're in high school, you're thinking about college, and you think about, things later on. So I could talk about some of those things, and those students connected to me in a way that most other students didn't connect with their teachers, because they just weren't real. Like, I went through an experience. I'm teaching about it. I'm gonna talk about my experience too that relates to that. And they're like, oh wait, that really can happen. Yes, this can happen, and I'm gonna walk you through how to not go through that. Right. So having a Black man, I mean, I think like Pie in the Sky, I think it would be phenomenal. Like, I think it'd be awesome. But the Indian American woman that I have is pretty dope too, right? So I don't really know. I think it would be cool to have a black male. I'd be interested, black woman. My mom's a social worker. Like, she literally would sit and talk to me for hours, and I'd be like this is like in high school. I'd be like, oh, I just like, can I just get a whooping and you like leave to my room? Right? Like, I don't want to fight no more. I feel like Martin after getting beaten up by Tommy Hearns. Like, I don't want to fight no more, Gina. Like, I didn't want to talk anymore. But that's what my mom did. My dad was different. My dad, he would whoop, he would beat, and my mom would sit and we would talk. And I'm like, just wait, can Daddy just beat me or somebody? So, anyways, I'm open, to say the least. I'm open.
That's good. Oh, that was great. So we are going to finally wrap up here. I want to thank you guys for being a part of this show, and I'm thanking you in advance for being a part of subsequent shows. Appreciate that. Shanta, I want to give you a plug. I believe this space is to be able to highlight people and what they're doing as well. And so you have obviously your own practice, and there's some things that you've been working on. I want you to go ahead and talk to the people about what that is. Go ahead. This is your time to shine.
Ooh, thank you. Shine bright like a diamond. My name is Shanta Hayes. I'm an LMSW in the state of Georgia, and I have a practice, slhayes.com. It's SL Hayes Group. You can find me on social media at slhayes_speaks. And my platform, while I work primarily with families and children, is self-care. But I also do educational consulting. So Des talked about how he had an episode, but my job is to go in and train educators on how to recognize what trauma looks like and then what resources they might be able to give their students. On my self-care platform, though, I'm very much about taking care of yourself, which is what my most recent book, Mindful Beginnings Self-Care Journal, is about. It is a very interactive and engaging, reflective journal filled with coloring pages that guides you in an exploration of self. So it's asking you the questions, who are you? Why are you here? What do you like? Do you even consider those things? Do you put yourself on the calendar? Because I believe in prioritizing self. Because if you cannot take care of yourself, can you really take care of the others that you claim that you want to take care of so badly? Because typically when you're in a hospital, you're not taking care of nobody. When your body has broken down due to neglect, due to poor diet, due to poor sleeping habits, due to dehydration, because most of us don't drink enough water.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? When you let yourself run down, you're no good to others. So self-care is a priority in order to be able to continue to give, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. But the book is available on Amazon.com. So please go support. Awesome. And check out slhayes.com to see if we may be able to fit any of your needs. And check out slhayes_speaks for our weekly motivations.
All right, that sounds great. So what I will do, once we wrap up here, I'm going to actually put together sort of a sheet of resources for mental health awareness and Black men and mental health. I found a sheet, and so I really just want to make it a little easier for everyone to click on and that kind of thing. So get that squared away. And then additionally, I'll have links to your practice as well. Okay, so
thank you.
Yeah, of course. So thank you guys for being with me today, working out some of the technology kinks right beforehand and having some fun. Guys, we have a lot of fun. We're very silly. This was a deep kind of, moment for us today. But we're actually really silly. Desmond is probably one of the funniest people I know in real life.
I'm not funny.
So the fact that he's like a principal, I remember being like, wait, what?
They let him do that?
We had a lot of fun. And so we definitely have to do this again, and we will. So
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Have a wonderful day today. And I'll see you.
All
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All All right, you guys take care.